In the auto industry, timing is everything. Get it right and sales should follow. Don't believe me? Just take a look at the Lexus RX, which came out in 1998 and has been a hit ever since. So what about this all-electric Lexus RZ? Is it a day late and a dollar short, or is the timing just right as electric vehicle sales start to pick up? That's what we're here to find out. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that.
Well, guys, here I am in the south of France, and I'm not telling you that as some sort of flex. I'm telling you that for two reasons. One, you've probably noticed the snow outside my driver's window here. That is very rare in this part of the world. This was totally unexpected. So I'm telling you that because A, it's kind of weird and unique being Canadian, is that I'm testing in conditions that aren't too unlike what we might deal with at home. The other reason I'm telling you is that the B-roll that is provided, well, it's not exactly going to match with the stuff you are seeing right now. And that's not such a big deal to me. It's maybe a little peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of exactly what we do. When I go on these first drive events, I don't have the luxury of having my talented camera guy, Will Johnson, with me. I have to do this on my own, which is fine. It just means leaning on the manufacturer's supplied footage. And I'll tell you right now, Lexus was not expecting this. So the footage you're gonna see of this RZ isn't going to match with the footage that you're seeing me shoot right now. Not such a big deal. I'm gonna give you my driving impressions. I did want to give you that disclaimer though, so let's get to it. Now, I'm behind the wheel of the Lexus RZ, although that's not totally true because, as you might be able to tell, I'm actually behind the yoke. That is right, I am testing out for the first time the steering yoke that Tesla came out with first, and I was a little skeptical of, and then I read Toyota and Lexus was developing one, and I was just as skeptical. Now, I'm still not sold shortly into my drive here, although it's not quite as unnerving as I thought it would be because it's a very responsive steer-by-wire system. Important disclaimer, this is not yet coming to Canada. Apparently, we're looking at maybe next year. The Lexus team said they're still perfecting it, not quite ready to roll it out, but it's ready enough for us to test it here, and it's definitely responsive. Almost too responsive. It's a little twitchy. That was the warning I got before I set out today, and I noticed right away. This has a variable steering ratio, which isn't uncommon even in traditional steering setups with rack and pinion, but the difference is this being by wire, it can adjust in real time, and it is very sensitive. So even right now, as soon as I just put a little steering input in, it wants to move in that direction, which is good for responsiveness, but it does take some getting used to. Something else that I'm getting used to here is just how incredibly smooth this thing is. Now, I gotta say, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say I was skeptical, but I wasn't feeling all that optimistic about this vehicle's timing, the range. That's still a problem for me, and we will get to that shortly. But I should have known better. I mean, just because this is built on the same platform as the Toyota BZ4X and the Subaru Solterra doesn't mean this is just a dolled up mainstream vehicle. There is a lot to like here. It is very luxurious. It's very smooth, comfortable, all the amenities you would expect. It does not feel like a mainstream vehicle that's just been rebadged. You can really see where the Lexus engineers put some extra time and effort to set this one apart from its two siblings. Now, this being a Euro spec model, it's obviously not quite the same as the one we are going to get in Canada, but it's pretty close. This one in particular to the executive, the range topping version of the RZ 450 or whatever it's called that we are getting at home. So it's got all kinds of amenities. It's got this panoramic sunroof that you can hit the button and dim it. Pretty cool. Toyota had it on the Venza, so it's not that new, but it's still nice. This steering yoke, yes. Heated and ventilated seats, banging stereo system, you know the drill. The problem I'm having is the pricing of this executive version in Canada. It's 81 grand before freight and tax, which is a lot of money, again, for limited range, because this thing rides on 20-inch wheels, and that means its official range estimate is only 315 kilometers. And Lexus made a big deal in a presentation about the fact that it feels like that's a realistic number that its customers are going to be happy with. Obviously, that's up to you guys to decide, but in my opinion, and the opinion of many Canadians apparently, is that 400 is about the minimum. There was that KPMG study that I referenced not too long ago in that Mercedes EQB review that I did that you guys can watch on the channel. A KPMG study said that 80% of Canadians said they would not consider an EV unless it had 400 kilometers of driving range on a single charge. And that seems very reasonable to me. The fact this thing can't do it, well, it does make me a little wary of just how successful it's going to be. And it's not my business whether a vehicle is successful or not, but I look at it for you guys as potential drivers. Does this thing cut it? I think from an amenities perspective, from a smoothness perspective, from a powertrain perspective, yes, absolutely. But from a driving range perspective, that's the part that makes me nervous. Would I be willing to spend $81,000 on this range topping version to only get 315 kilometers of range? I don't know. That's just not quite enough in my opinion. Now, if you go for one of the lesser trims, like the Signature, I think it's called, is the entry-level version. That has 18-inch wheels, and apparently you can drive 354 kilometers on a single charge. Still not great, but obviously better. It also begs the question, could you just slap 18s on this range-topping executive and expect to get that extra, I don't know, 30, 40 kilometers of range? Maybe, although I'd be skeptical because of all the extra goodies that you have. You've got more electrical components, more weight that is going to impact range probably pretty significantly. So I'm not totally sold on it, but I guess that's something worth exploring in the future. Now, this does have some cool features like a dual motor electric all-wheel drive setup. Go figure. Electric motor up front for the front wheels, one in the back to power the rear ones. The one up front, it's 150 kilowatts. The one in the back is 80. And it is a fully variable electric all-wheel drive system. It's constantly working. So there's no official word on what the torque split is because it's constantly adjusting. Now, there is one way to kind of control it. You can set it in range mode, and that is going to dedicate the power to the front wheels, shuts off the climate control system, and limits the top speed to 100 kilometers an hour, all in the name of efficiency. Make sure to stretch that range as much as possible. But the rest of the time, it's constantly juggling the torque from the front wheels to the rear ones, and it can send it all to the back or all to the front, depending on the conditions. It's also pretty cool to listen to the Lexus team talk about stuff like the way it's going to be proactive to reduce nose lift when you accelerate and reduce nose dive when you brake. Very cool. And it does seem to work a little bit. It feels very flat and smooth when I get my foot into that accelerator pedal. Now, I do also want to talk about the braking for a second because yes, there is regenerative braking. It's variable. You use these little tiny finger paddles on the steering wheel, or the steering yoke, I should say, but it doesn't bring the vehicle to a complete stop. And you guys know that to me is just something that has to happen these days, especially in something with relatively limited range. You're going to need all the help you can get. I really wish this thing had proper one pedal driving. That's a bit of a disappointment, but everything else about this is very good so far. I like how smooth and responsive it is. It's fairly quiet. It feels properly luxurious. Again, the timing of this thing, I feel like Lexus could have stepped its game up a little bit, considering it is one of the later brands to enter the EV game, especially when it comes to range, but everything else is there. I really do think so. Whether you're willing to pay the 65 grand for the entry-level version or the somewhere around 72, I believe, for the mid-grade trim, or all the way up to 81 for this range topper, that remains to be seen, especially because of that big problem, which is range. But everything else about this is very good. It's very spacious. With this yoke, one of the benefits you do get is more visibility of the instrument cluster. And I am a tall guy. That is a big problem for me. The steering wheel cutting off part of the display, so I constantly have to duck down or try to look over it. Yes, this has a head-up display as well, so it makes it somewhat redundant, but that is one of the unique features of having this steering yoke, is just this great look at the instrument display. That is the big benefit. It's got this big 14-inch touchscreen. It's got the latest infotainment system from Lexus. There's voice control, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both of those are wireless, and it's got navigation that works really well. That's what I'm using on these very unfamiliar roads, and it's doing a pretty great job. I've got no complaints about the features, the tech, the amenities. Aside from range and maybe pricing, those are my two areas of concern.
With all due respect to the LS, I do think this RZ might have the most luxurious disposition in terms of driving of any Lexus you can buy today. My only real concern is that range. That's where the timing comes in. I do think Lexus could have done just a little bit better in that regard, considering how long it took for the RZ to arrive, but everything else about this has been a very pleasant surprise.